Today I want to show you guys a really simple workflow for Darktable that I think you guys can use to get started right away. Because, you know, you get into Darktable, it's very hands-on, it's very lots of like modules and stuff like that everywhere, and it can be very intimidating. I want to give you guys a basic workflow that you can use to get started and kind of get learning and, you know, actually be productive in this software while you're learning. This is the newest Darktable, which is 5.4.1 as of recording this video. The first thing is that I want to drive home about working with Darktable is you can reveal sharpness in an image with Darktable, but you cannot create sharpness. You can't take a blurry image and make it sharp. Like I'll give you an example. Okay, let's take this image right here. Take something like this image right here. Okay, there is nothing I could do in Darktable to make that squirrel sharp. It's just not going to happen because the inherent sharpness isn't there, and you can't use the computer to make something that wasn't there to begin with. See, in this case, the information just isn't there for the program to bring out. So that's the first thing I want to drive home. You cannot make bad photos sharp in Darktable, but what you can do is you can make good photos better. Here we are back to the original photo that we were dealing with. In wildlife photography, or in a lot of different types of photography, what really makes or breaks a photo is the eye sharp? Now in this one, the eye is not the sharpest. It'll be good enough to demonstrate this tutorial. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to the correct module right here. It's going to be the second last one over from the right, and there are 4 modules here that I apply to every photo. First is denoise. Now with denoise, I kind of just turn it on, and I always leave it on the default because the default is what I find personally works the best, because if you start trying to crank it up too much, you lose a lot of detail in your photo. The next is lens correction. Now in this one, it just found the lens automatically. This is one of the ones in the database. Now if you don't find your lens here, what you do is you go through, you click right here, and you go through manufacturers here, and you go by manufacturer and then type. Now in this case, it's not actually reading my lens type correctly. Sometimes it does that, to be honest. That is just something you kind of got to live with, but we're going to go with my actual one which is right here. See, and that corrects distortion and vignetting in your image automatically. It's based on the Lens Fund database, which is really cool because it's an open source database being updated all of the time. The next one I always turn on is chromatic aberration, even though there isn't much in this one. The next one is haze removal, which just adds a little bit of clarity by adding in a little bit of saturation. Next, we're going to go to the color tab. I like to work right to left. Typically, what I like to do is turn on the color balance RGB module. This gets you all kinds of different options, which I'm not going to go into today. That's a lot more advanced for the purposes of this tutorial. Just know for the purposes of today, for having a nice basic workflow, you can go presets, basic colorfulness, and this gives you a few different presets. The one that I like the most is the vibrant colors, although natural skin is one that I also do use for portraits. And you can see here where that really made some of the color of this photo pop for us. Color equalizer, that's one that I don't always use, but sometimes I do. I don't really go into the advanced mode very much because and again, the advanced mode would be much beyond the scope of this tutorial. But what I like to do is I'm going to go into the presets, and there's a couple of really nice presets here. These are 2 that I like. The Kodachrome 64, which tends to kind of give you kind of this more 70s film look. And you have the Kodak Porta, which kind of adds in a bit more, almost like a bit more of a little greenish tint. They're made to simulate the colors of film, Kodachrome 64 film and Porta 400, obviously. And in this image, I quite like the Kodachrome 64. I like the color that it gives. I always have. I found that color very pleasing. Now, the next module is one that can be... I don't play around with this one too much because you can very easily end up with terrible looking photos. And that's the local contrast module. Now, the local contrast module, you can't take an image that wasn't sharp and make it sharp, but you can take a sharp image and make it more sharp. And the local contrast module is how you do that. There's two presets in it. There's one for clarity, and there is one for HDR local tone remapping. And that's the one we're going to use. And you can see how much detail that pops out. Now I'm going to show you the clarity because you don't want to use HDR on every photo. Sometimes it looks terrible. Sometimes it doesn't. And this is the clarity. And this is it turned off. Now, personally, for this photo, we're going to go with the HDR tone mapping because it brings out all sorts of really great little details on the bird. HDR tends to be really good for wildlife if you've already got a sharp picture. It's not so good for people, if I'm going to be honest. Because sometimes with people, you know, you want like a softer, kind of hide the blemishes a bit. This module here, this is the tone equalizer. And this is the one where I will use the advanced. And I'll show you why. This gives us our different exposure ranges here at the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to move one just a little bit. And you see that makes... we can see the kind of a range in the photo here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our mouse. We're going to drag it over. And we're going to see where it tells us like 4.5. So right here is where I want to bring the exposure up a little bit. So that's between 2, around 4. We want to bring the exposure up a little bit there to kind of make the eye pop a little bit more. You can see that that brightens every part of the photo that is about the same. So that kind of brightened our background a little bit too. Perhaps we're going to want to take the areas around -1, darken them down a little bit to create a little bit more emphasis on our subject. That looks pretty good, in my opinion. This one here does have a number of presets. I'll go through them a little bit because sometimes the compressed shadows is one that I use a lot. And what that does is that kind of takes the entire histogram of your photo and kind of compacts it down a little bit for you. You have your contrast tone curve, which kind of does the exact opposite. I'll show you what this one does. What this one does is it takes your darks and makes them darker, and it takes your lights and make them lighter like this. And sometimes it can look really cool. But it's not really what I want for this photo. Here, I'll show you how the shadow compression looks too. Now this one here, you want to be a little bit more on the soft because sometimes this photo doesn't look too bad, but sometimes that can really destroy your contrast. So we're going to go back to where it was before, and that's how I like it. We have the exposure module, which I'm not, this image was pretty well exposed from the beginning. And this is one you want to kind of apply last because some of the contrast modules like the local clarity will kind of brighten your photo. But still, we'll bring it up just a touch. I often find myself bringing up my photos about half a stop or so. Raw files, you can push them pretty nicely, especially with Canon. Two others that I do want to show you very briefly because you might end up using them quite a bit is the crop. and the rotate and perspective. For crop, I don't like to do freehand crops because you got to think about it like if you're going to print these photos or anything like that, you need to have them in certain ratios. Now, a Canon camera like this 6D that was used to take this automatically takes pictures in this aspect ratio right here, which is a 3:2 aspect ratio or 4:6. See, and you can see if I turn it on, I can crop it in like that, and now this maintains the original aspect ratio. And I think I will actually crop this image a little bit. Also, the guides is a very handy tool here because I can then put the bird on my third lines, use a rule of thirds composure, which I think I will do. Perhaps I want to go more, keep them off. Yeah. Now, a composure like this would be something I like, but it would be maybe a little bit more controversial, even though I like it because it has the bird looking off into space. You can go with a more orthodox composure, which would kind of put your bird right in the center, just like it was initially. Or we can keep them in the center and top third, which I keep the eye in the top third, which I think that's going to be the one I'm going to go with. And then we can click out of that. Now with this one here, we don't have to rotate it because, but where this comes in really important is in architectural photography and landscape photography and stuff like that, especially when you're doing things handheld and things are not very straight. You know, you're kind of getting them as straight as you can in camera, but you know, maybe as straight as you can in camera ain't all that straight sometimes. So, just to show you how it works, it kind of crops down from the largest area and tilts the image. So you can see if I was to go like extreme, it does like that. And the most it'll rotate it is 10 degrees either direction, which is usually more than enough. We're going to reset that and turn that off because I'm not actually using that for this picture. Typically, you would want to use your rotate and perspective module before you crop it. Another thing to do too, before you use rotate and perspective, make sure that you do your lens corrections. Because if you don't, and you're trying to straighten it based off of a line in the image, then the distortion of the lens can really give you a lot of trouble, even on good lenses. That's a nice simple workflow that I hope you guys can take and use and learn. If there was one thing that I would add to the advice of shoot, it's going to be edit too, because that's how you're going to develop your style. And I'm hoping you guys can take this tutorial and use it to just dive right in and start actually learning about Darktable in a productive way. Because like I said, it's very intimidating, I know. So don't forget to like and subscribe and pray every day.